Hello, welcome to another episode of the I Am Jen Wilson, the Healing Rebel podcast. This is episode 238. So if you are new here, you've got lots to catch up on. If you don't already follow, like, subscribe, whatever you do on whichever platform, can you please do that? Just as a wee favour to me and to Kezia, who I have on today's podcast with me. I'm very excited to have you here, Kezia. So thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, I'm very excited to be here, Jen.
I believe you were speaking to my friend Lisa the other day, and she's in my accountability group, Lisa the dog witch, who's been on the podcast a couple of times, and she was like, "Oh my God, I've just recorded a podcast with Kezia. She's so lovely. It was so much fun." And I was like, "Yes, I'm recording one with her this week."
Oh, I love that. I did love that conversation. We were both basically came to the conclusion of like, I do what she does, but with humans, and she does what I do, but with dogs. And we were like, brilliant. This is so good.
Yeah, that's the same as my relationship with Lisa, and she's also a good friend, so it is brilliant. So yes, so thank you very much for having you here. So I want to start with the question: what does a healthy body look like and feel like to you?
Oh, that's a good question. For me personally, if I was to sum it up in one word, it would be freedom. And that sense of kind of liberation in my own skin and in the fullest, most holistic sense. So, in my mind, in my thoughts about my body, in what it looks like, my thoughts about what it looks like, how it functions on a day to day basis, from getting up to going to bed, to going for a poo, to having periods, to skin, to all of that sort of kind of, I always think about it as like a whole sort of system. And so that essence of wholeness and everything working together. I also think about it as, I talk about this a lot with clients about making sure our body is our teammate and our ally. I think it's really easy for, I will generalize and say women especially, to be really separated or maybe even disassociated from our bodies. So actually really connected to our whole being, that without ignoring any parts, because our brain loves to get maybe really fixated on biochemistry and biology and cellular health, for example. You might be totally obsessed with cell membranes, which are really important, but you might completely ignore the more spiritual side of things, or the toxins in your life, or nervous system regulation. And actually what I find in my own health, and the most joy and freedom that's been brought to me in my own health journey, has been when I've actually just acknowledged all the different parts of myself and witnessed them, accepted them, but also found out how can I bring more alignment, more balance, and essentially, as cheesy as it sounds, more love to all the parts of me, but in a really practical way, not just esoteric, although I love me a whole lot of spiritual woo-ness, but really practically, what does love look like for my cells and my bones and my brain and my sleep and my hormones? And yeah, that would be why I would first come to mind anyway.
And more may develop as we have a chat, because as we think about nature outside as being an ecosystem. If you grow vegetables, all the different elements of soil needs to be a particular way for certain vegetables or plants or whatever to grow. But for some reason, the science world maybe, or was it the patriarchy? Something along the way,
Probably a combination of the two.
probably a combination of the two, disconnected us human beings from that ecosystem, from being nature. But we are, like, if you look at our microbiome and the soil's microbiome, there's big connections there, right?
Yeah, totally. I talk about with even last night I was chatting to a client, and we were talking about, because it's very easy. So this particular client had a lot of like gut issues, IBS stuff, they've been going on for decades. And so we'd run like a gut test and stool testing with them, and we'd uncovered some of their root causes, why that was. And, they've made a lot of progress, but they had kind of gone down this well-worn anxiety spiral of fixating on what foods is giving me symptoms. Like, is it the carrots? Is it is it the, and I'm like, hey, food's important. Yeah, there's a whole area of science, of nutritional science, like, great. But yeah, actually what we're doing is changing the ecosystem. Like, it's not just about carrots. it's not just food is important, but what we're doing is shifting the whole garden. Or I often with people, with clients, I always talk about it like with the gut microbiome anyway, but it's like we're doing a grand designs of your gut microbiome. We're just gonna like, have a whole renovation going on. And because we think about it like if you bought a house and the garden was minging and there was like dog poo everywhere and a trolley and plastic bags, you wouldn't look at that garden and go, there's nothing I can do. I'm just screwed with this awful garden. I'm never going to be able to grow vegetables. I'm never going to have that rose garden I dreamed of. You would go, oh, I just need to clean up this ecosystem. And over time, I can grow flowers. I'll be able to grow carrots. I'll be able to, I could have a lovely garden. And I think to your point, we forget that in terms of approaching our own bodies and systems and own health, for sure.
Yeah, and when you think about it like a garden, there'll be some things that flourish really well in some gardens and not in others, depending on the type of soil, but also depending on the external environment. So growing pineapples in Scotland isn't really going to happen
Yeah.
because the climate isn't right. And that's the same for a lot of foods that we consume. Like your environment isn't conducive to that. So I talk quite a lot about um where our cells have come from an evolutionary standpoint, for like your degeneration. So if you have done your DNA testing, then looking at where your ancestors are from, because that can give you some indication of what foods might be really good for you. Because if we go from survival of the fittest, the fittest cells have survived based on what they've been fed over those years. So if you're from the west coast of Scotland, which I am 100% from the west coast of Scotland
Yeah.
and Ireland, I'm like, me eating pineapples might be delicious, but my body might not be okay with that because it's evolutionary. It hasn't grown. I don't have that ecosystem that can tolerate. It might be fine in small amounts, but eating pineapple every day, which is something that I used to do. I used to eat a 500-gram tub of pineapple every day because I heard it had good digestive enzymes in it.
Yeah.
It's like, why is my body not happy? Or maybe because I've overloaded it with something that it can't actually tolerate very well. So,
Yeah.
yeah, those kind of considerations I think can be useful.
Yeah, I think it can be really useful to think, and it then can be really interesting to look at different dietary approaches through that. So, you know, 200 years ago, living in Scotland, would you be able to be a vegan? No, you probably wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't imagine if I lived roughly where I live now, I'd be eating probably stuff, fish from local lochs. I'd maybe have some sort of livestock, chickens. I'd have a lot of root vegetables. And I'm not saying everything was perfect 200 years ago. I'm very grateful to be able to get myself some guacamole from time to time. I would have really missed that. And dark chocolate. I love dark chocolate. We definitely weren't growing that in Scotland.
No.
But it can just be a helpful lens to look at, okay, what is my body grown used to? And also just to acknowledge the way that the food industry, and first of all, that it became an industry, and maybe many years ago it was a really important aspect of our society, but how food has become an industry and the wider systems at play that's really changed what access to food we have and what we deem even as food as well.
Yeah, because obviously there's been shock headlines that ultra processed food is not good for you, and I'm like, are you
Oh,
fucking kidding me on, man? I've been beating this drum since I came into this industry in 2002, and you're just catching up now. Like it's having this moment of, oh, naughty, naughty, but they're not going to do anything about it. They'll
no.
just rebrand everything, and it'll still be the same. So we, as the population, need to take control because with things like these industries, they only change when people stop buying stuff.
Yeah.
So if we're buying the fruit and vegetables and the fish and the meats and whatever it is that are real, actual food, not food-like substances, then they will stop making these food-like substances because nobody's buying them. Because at the end of the day, it's about profit to them. It's not about anything else.
Yeah, which I think is a really huge point, and you don't even need to like go down that avenue that much if it's, I don't know, to whatever negative for your brain, but just acknowledging that food is primarily about profit now. And so it's just kind of looking at that with eyes wide open and looking at the systems at play that I think for a lot of people that come to me, and you probably find this with your clients, there's an undercurrent for a lot of them of self-blame and shame, feeling embarrassed that they've gotten to this point of having diabetes, or they're crapping themselves with IBS, or they're whatever it is, like, and they're just, there's, it's their fault. And while we do need to take responsibility for our choices, it can be really helpful to see the time I think we're at, especially as women, which is a lot of who I work with, is that we're kind of feeling the consequence of so many systems that have been set up against us, whether it's oppressive medical systems towards women's health, where we just have not had research. We have not, it's shocking if you even just go down that aisle of, hundreds, not that long ago, hysteria was a medical diagnosis that male doctors would give to females and fob them off with. So we're kind of rumbling against that system. We've got the food system that's coming up against us that it's sometimes often more expensive to buy good quality meats, fresh fish from Scotland, good quality eggs. It's cheaper to buy some chicken nuggets for you and your kids and some oven chips and some rubbish imported food. I think we sometimes, while we do need to take responsibility, we sometimes need to realize actually there's so many external systems that make it inevitable for the symptoms you have now, the chronic illness that we're facing, the fact that women have more autoimmunity than ever before, our children are facing more neurodevelopmental issues than ever before. Like, there is a reason for that. But the annoying thing that our brain doesn't love is there's not just one reason for it. It's not just because we're all low in B12, or it's because we all eat gluten. That's the one issue. All of those things can play a role, but it's actually having a systems-based approach. And I also do some work with a charity called Food for the Brain. I consult with them. And so there's some great research with a researcher called Tommy Wood that's all looking at this systems-based approach. And I think that is hopefully where medicine in general is moving towards, because we have had to, I think sometimes even just for public health, we've had to set up our hospitals as gastroenterology, dermatology, endocrinology, pediatrics. But we all know logically we are one body. We have our internal environment and we are affected by our external environment. Like, that is really how we work. And I think that's why the real strength is in a more personalized approach, or a holistic approach, or orthomolecular approach, or functional medicine approach. There's lots of different names for essentially saying the same thing.
Yeah, it's essentially. You're saying that we're kind of hopefully moving towards this less reductionist approach and more holistic approach. I'm in a WhatsApp group chat with a lot of medical people, and the divide even between them is wild. Like, I put a post in the chat yesterday about vitamin D and how the NICE guidelines and the UK guidelines are like 22 times too low
Yeah.
for having good health. And one of the doctors came straight in and was like, well, I find the NICE guidelines and the BNF completely comprehensible, and that's what I use to follow. And I was like, right, but have you not watched the video that's gone through a scientific paper showing why it's wrong, and that these numbers are only based on bone health, not on immune function health, not on anything else? And he was just adamant that he was right in it. And then all these other doctors were coming in with their research and their thoughts and their opinions, and the guidelines are only guidelines, they're not a rule book. And I was like, wow, this is fascinating to watch unfold, because even within the medical community, you've got a split. And interestingly, it was a male-female split. The men were all very digging in. These are the rules. This is the guidelines. This is what we are doing. And the women were all, and this is only maybe a handful of people. So I'm like being very,
Yeah.
I'm just basing it on this one conversation. But I was like, well, that's really interesting that this group of women are happy to look beyond the guidelines, and even they're not breaking the rules, but they are having more open conversations with their patients around, this is what the guidelines are, this is what I personally do, this is what we're seeing in the research, so you go and make an informed choice versus the men who are like, this is what the guidelines say, this is what you're doing. And you're
Yeah.
like, what is going on? But I do know, because I've had private conversations with quite a few doctors, and they're like, there's a lot of the medical community are scared of the GMC and scared of being struck off. And I was like, but you can't be struck off if you've got scientific evidence backing up the reason that you have done what you have done to be able to give your patient advice.
Well,
Like,
that's what you should hope, but there is cases where people have been actually, or very nearly struck off, or their reputation has been so defamated, if that's the right word, because of them pointing out signs, essentially. And I think that is, again, I think it's really interesting to be aware of that in terms of, and I think a lot depends on the GP itself, but also understanding the system that a lot of the time their hands are tied a bit, if that, and it's not to, to let people off the hook, but it's the whole framework. Again, it's looking at how does it work? It's do you tick the boxes, and then what are the out, like, then what do you do? Tick this box, take vitamin D, and there's reference ranges are out of date, and also based on all the entire population. If you think about thyroid reference ranges and checks and vitamin D, and I get clients blood work when they come to work with me, and they're like, no, I want. Yeah, they sometimes won't send it to me because like it's all normal, like, and I'm like, no, please send it to me. Let's have a look at it, and we might run extra bloods if there's often stuff missing. And you're like, this is maybe in reference range, but it's not your pattern. If your thyroid, if your TSH has always been 1.5 and all of a sudden you jump down to 4.2, you're technically in reference range, but that is not healthy for you. And there is research around subclinical hypothyroidism and these kinds of things, but it's just the amount of time that research takes to infiltrate into the healthcare system to update it is like takes decades. I think the last time I heard it was an average of 17 years, but that was a long time ago. So I think it probably takes longer. And I think it's a big paradigm shift actually in terms of growing up, especially, there was very much a hierarchy of the doctor knows everything. And you just, especially when it was primarily a male to female relationship back in the day, there was an element of submission there as times and years have always been between men and women. And I think what's happening now, again, is this rumble. It's this breaking of this paradigm where we go, well, I actually read something on PubMed about my vitamin D level being over 80. So what do you think about that? That is a big paradigm shift. And it's also a big paradigm shift of women especially, but for all humans, to go, oh, I don't want to be like, this is a weird, like, submissive relationship here. I can respect your training, the hard work you've done, your care for the community, 100%. But I don't just need to agree with what you've said. This is my body. I actually know the experience of my body better than you, and I want answers. And I think it's our current medical system, as many benefits as it has, doesn't help people to find logical answers for the symptoms they have always. Sometimes it does, but a lot of the time, and you probably find this, the people that come to you, the people that come to me are the people that fall in the gaps. They know they don't have cancer. They know they don't have diverticulitis. They know they're maybe not in perimenopause yet based on their blood test, but they are struggling. And in the past, their only answer has been, well, you're either a hypochondriac, you're really anxious, or you're like a bit of a wuss and you just need to buck up a bit and deal with life. And now we're suddenly going, I think that's incorrect. I think the fact that I bleed heavily for 10 days is a problem and I would like an answer. It's a huge shift. And I think it's a really interesting time to be alive and to witness these changes. But I do think it's quite unsettling sometimes to realize, oh, this whole system that I'm a part of is kind of at a slight point of rupture in a way.
Yeah. And I think even thinking about doctors and their training. So when I first got diagnosed with Crohn's, I saw the practice manager who has retired about 4 or 5 years ago. And me and him had a conversation about how, in his eyes, the medical system was moving in the wrong direction because it was becoming more reductionist instead of more holistic. And his training back 45, 50 years previously had been the whole body, looking in people's eyes, looking at their tongue, having a conversation about what else was going on in their life. And when you used to get, when you got an appointment with him, sometimes you'd be sitting in the waiting room for an hour waiting for your appointment because he took the time he needed to with each patient. It wasn't 7 minutes and out. But then when you see the younger doctor in the surgery, it would be, what's the one thing that you're in for? We're not talking about anything else, and we'll get you out in the 7 minutes. And there's a lot to do with the training there. Um, and I've got a family member who's currently going through medical school, and one of my other cousins is a GP, and when he was at medical school, he was in uni Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, classes, labs, autopsies, constant, constant, constant. And now it's you're in the class for half an hour and then you're sent away to do your own research online. Like there's not that same
Wow.
training is completely different. Like they're hardly in actually hands-on learning. They don't do autopsies anymore as
Oh,
part of the
yes.
training. And you're like, wow. So you want me to trust you to touch my body when you've never actually touched a body? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Or do
what's going on here?
surgery.
What is going on? But I think because the internet's here and we can access so much more information and we can get different people's opinion. Like at the moment, my YouTube feed is one video is the carnivore diet reduces inflammation, and then the next one is veganism reduces inflammation. And I'm like, both of them can be true depending on what your starting point is.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's that sort of and it's a really human thing to do. We just want an answer. We want a black and white thing. But I think, especially with chronic illness, because that sort of area that I work in most, and I think it can be different with different types of situations. But with that, or with clients that I see, there's never just one thing. Now, there might be a cluster. The goal is always to find what I would do strategically is you're thinking about, okay, what are the 4 or 5 big root causes going on here? What are the big movers and shakers that if we just bring more balance, nourishment, repletion, whatever you want to call it, to the brain signaling, brain health, to your ovaries, to your whatever it is, then actually the knock-on effect, the ripple effect of that in the rest of the body will be huge. But I think that is why there is more of a leaning towards hopefully personalized medicine and more people thinking, just ask, because it's actually a really it's very simple but powerful of like, why? And I do say this to clients, you don't always know why you have whatever it is your symptoms or diagnosis is, but there should at least be a really good darn effort to try and figure it out. There's definitely elements of just surrender and acceptance. Shit happens. You just like, I don't know why. I'm just going to have to let go and accept where I am today. And these are maybe the limitations of my body based on my genetics, history, whatever. But I don't think we ask that question enough in terms of, okay, why is it that I have had eczema since I was a child? Like, but my brother doesn't? That's like, it can't just be genetic, can it? I think just allowing that, but often to ask that question, you often need support to answer it because it's tricky when it's your own body, isn't it? Because there's so many emotions and pain and discomfort and what other people think, and it is difficult, I think, having kind of journeyed through that, and I'm sure you're the same, to kind of figure it out for yourself. You do need a bit of I always like to say I work really integratively. I can never say the word, but it's like ideally you want your GP on board and maybe a consultant that you have, and maybe some sort of like, from my perspective, I always want some sort of like body work support going on. And then you might have the nutritional, the environmental, or you might need actually to go and have some really good therapy. It's like gathering your team, but that can be quite a privileged place to stand from as well, in terms of, and can feel more overwhelming of like, geez. And then you can get people that do get sucked in sometimes to the overwhelm of it, or to some of the more predatorial kind of services out there that obviously can take place as well.
Yeah, I know definitely when I started on my healing journey, I'd already been in the fitness and health industry for quite a while, but I went through well, why is my body inflamed? Like sort of reverse engineering, what is Crohn's disease? It's inflammation. Why have I got inflammation? What am I doing? Looking at what we now call as lifestyle medicine pillars, like what's my sleep, what is it I'm actually eating? Because although I was eating healthy foods, I was eating on the run, I hadn't slept, I was shoveling food down between classes, so I was never in a rest state. My nervous system was constantly unsympathetic because I was teaching loads of high intensity exercises and going to the gym to work out for myself and doing this
Wow.
and doing that. And I was suppressing trauma, and I was doing this, and I was doing that. And it's easy to go, oh my God, here's all these things I'm doing wrong. I need to fix them. And it's not about fixing them. It was about addressing them and then being compassionate to myself. Like that self-compassion was a huge part because I was very quick to go into self-blame.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people do that. And I think it's a slippery slope of, okay, let's look at this from like a strategic, and I suppose that's also why I say I'm a nutritionist and a coach, because I think the amount of people that I've seen that have come to me working with other people or just figuring it out on their own, and they've actually created a really stressed, disordered approach to their whole body and health because but I think that sometimes does come from, or can come from, and everybody's different, really not thoroughly understanding the kind of driving factors. Or they maybe do understand the driving factors, like obviously was the case with you, there's this, these are contributing, but not meeting that with the compassion, the acceptance, okay, well, this is just where I am. And that sort of sense of surrender. So I think that's where, whether you want to call it coaching, mindset work, these kind of energetic practices are also really, really important. And that's kind of why I went and also trained as a yoga teacher, of just like, we do need tools to integrate some of these things, thoughts and beliefs that come up, because there does need to be such, you can't heal a body from a place of self-criticism. I say this to clients all the time, like if you're wanting to create transformation and change and all these things that we kind of, people often want, they desire, and they're clear that they desire it. If we think about other analogies of this, and I give the potty training, like the toilet training one all the time, like with kids, no human, like all humans know that if you want a child to stop wearing nappies, you get a potty and you encourage the heck out of them. You throw confetti, you praise them for getting like one, like, drop of wee in a potty. You would never, never even to think about it is despicable in the brain. Go like, can't believe you're not can't wee in a potty like that. You would never do that. Like even thinking about it makes you feel a bit like repulsed and horrified. Yet that is how a lot of us approach this transformation, this healing, this evolution, this becoming of our own bodies. We approach it with well, you shouldn't be in this state, and I can't believe, and you've got so much inflammation, you have to fix it all, and you're never going to fix it all, and blah, 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 blah. And I personally have come to the conclusion, you can be doing all the right strategic scientific things. You can have all the lab data. You can do all the nutrigenomic testings that I run, stool tests. But if fundamentally that is the energy behind your action, you will make very limited progress, because the way that you heal, the way you create change to your habits, to your environment, is essentially through celebration, through changing how the brain thinks, through essentially like love. But that can feel like a big step, to go towards self-love can sometimes be too much of a gap. So I just often with clients go towards like, let's just be really respectful to our body. Let's just appreciate it. Let's try and even create some neutrality and make sure our actions aren't coming from high anxiety, tension. Oh, if I eat an unorganic apple, I'm going to fill myself with toxins. Like, all of that really stressed approach. It's like really, you can't also get well by getting really stressed out about getting well, which is very common. I don't know if you find it with your clients, but the amount of people that come to me that are like, I know I've got SIBO, or I know I've got this thing, or I know I've got hypothyroidism and it's Hashimoto's and I have IBS and I also have this and I also have this. And they are so understandably stressed out about it, but you need to be able to take action, and strategic action still, but from a place of, you know what? I'm just going to really respect and appreciate my body. What does that manifest as in this week in my actions? What should I focus on? What should I prioritize? And that often also means that all or nothing approaches naturally fade away, because they often come from a very either kind of driven or overly like hyper aroused nervous system. And actually these small consistent, that's why I generally prefer to work with my main kind of program I work with people on is over 6 months. So we work consistently together over 6 months to take the pressure off, people healing themselves in a week. And we just work through things at a pace that works for them and can have that full sort of that fuller approach to it. But I think it's a really important point. And just the idea of, I don't love the idea of like the fixing language either, because it implies you're broken. And I think you can have a lot of symptoms that are really painful and difficult, but it doesn't mean you as a person are broken. Your symptoms are simply expressions of biology, balances, sometimes genetics, sometimes toxins, these different, but we often create a lot of identity. We link up our identity a lot with our bodies and our symptoms and our air quotes progress, and that's something you've got to know. You're inherently worthy, whether you're sick or whether you're well, whether you're in pain, whether you're not in pain, whether you're which is also a big part of the kind of undercurrent of some of the work that I do. But that's not often what brings people in. They want to just see the transformation, Jen, and you probably find this like, can you hear my 3 decades worth of pain in a session? And you're like, no.
I can try, but no, let's be realistic. I
Yeah.
think from what you were saying there, something that came to mind for me was I went for CBT therapy. And when I spoke to the therapist, one of the things she talked about, because she was specifically for, she specifically works with people with inflammatory bowel disease. And she was like, a lot of what I was telling her, she's like, oh, you're very angry. Like, there's a lot of anger in there. And we need to find a place where you can be in acceptance, because when you're in acceptance, that's going to help. And she did that visual of when you're in fight with your body and you've got this constant pushing, you can't ever relax into that, because you're fighting, if you're fighting your disease, even that language. And that one of the charities that I do work with don't talk about, because one of the hashtags is IBD warriors, and they're like, get warrior out of there, get the fighting disease, getting battling the disease. We're not winning against it. How do we get into acceptance? And that doesn't mean lie down and just be a sick person. It means, how do you accept each day as it comes? And like you were saying there about, what can I do today to nourish myself, to look after myself, to help and heal myself. And after 4 sessions with her, my symptoms greatly reduced.
I love that.
Like, the pain reduced, the frequency of going to the toilet reduced, because we had got into that place of, how am I feeling today? I'm actually not that bad. And more of that. And it's not the overly woo-woo or positive toxicity, I'm going to affirmation my way back to better health, but it was taking the pressure off of, right, I'm not fighting with this disease. I don't hate my body, because there's still lots of things I can do, even though there's some days that there's things I can't do. And I just go, okay, well, what do I need today? And being present and in the moment has been so much more beneficial on that healing journey for me than most other things.
Yeah, I think it makes a huge difference. I've done a lot. I live with a complex PTSD and I'm neurodivergent. And so learning how to really support the body through somatic practices, through therapeutic work, whether it's EMDR, or there's like millions of different therapeutic tools out there that can be super helpful. But I think it's again, it's acknowledging that it's one body, and your body holds, like, your body's been through everything. And if we don't process things, if we don't digest things, not just food, but also emotions and experiences, then actually it's going to affect how our biochemistry works. And I think that we can sometimes have this sort of, I know what you mean, there's loads of chat, it's like, let's fight this. And I'm like, I think we should listen first. Like, our symptoms often are messages. They're trying to communicate something. We often don't understand them, like it's a different language. But if we can listen, what is, like, I had a client recently that would drink a lot by their own, they say, I drink a bit too much, binge drink, and I know it's not good for me, and I vape and I don't want to. And she almost like said this to me in a really embarrassed way, because she's like, she knows it's not good for her, right? It's not like I needed to tell her that. And so there's like some shame there. And she's like, I really want to try and like fight the habits and like, like, oh, let's break these things. And I was like, I think actually we should first listen, because if you're vaping regularly, there's a need in your body that you're meeting with vaping. And that need's probably really biological, probably quite primal, and probably really important. So there's no point in us stopping vaping unless we meet that primary need with a different tool so that vaping becomes unnecessary. Same with drinking. It makes loads of sense that you want to drink more. You get lots of GABA, lovely neurotransmitter released. You're going to feel calm. And you really struggle. She really struggled with that genetically to kind of have this lovely GABA, which is one of the neurotransmitters that will be released in high amounts when you drink alcohol, FYI. So that's that feeling of alcohol. When people drink it, they go like, oh, I feel so like chilled for the moment. And then actually long term you disrupt and lower your GABA levels. Anyway, so it was actually more about like meeting, instead of judging it or fighting it or like trying to break the habit, of just being like, I think we need to support your GABA pathways. I think we need to look at dopamine and your brain health and how nourished you are. So that let's really bolster these. And then when you feel ready, when you feel well resourced and capable, then maybe we look at, okay, do we need to tweak these habits? How do you like, or will they naturally just sort of fade away? We don't need to like hustle to, I'm going to break all my bad habits. You can acknowledge that a habit doesn't serve you, but it is looking underneath that, witnessing the body, listening to it, like going like, what are you saying to me? Right. Oh, okay. This is all this joint pain. What is that? All right. I think it's inflammation, or I think it's whatever it is. And I think that's really important. But often we kind of create this war, like, and that's why I think at the start, when you asked that question, it was like, we're like allies with our bodies. We're not here to fight it or to force it into submission or to like pin it down. We're like in this beautiful dance with them, and it's a bit like a tango and a bit like a forwards and backwards, and it's not linear, it's not, but there's a partnership here. And yeah, I think we're more than our bodies and we live on beyond that, but that does not mean we disregard this really sacred home that we have while we're here on earth. And that does require, yeah, just a bit of listening and a bit of curiosity as well. Like, I think that probably what makes you really good at what you do, what makes me good at what I do, is I'm like endlessly curious. I'm like, so when do you have nightmares in the night? Or when exactly do you have that poo? And why did that feel uncomfortable? And what were you feeling? What was happening at work? And they're like, oh, actually, I just read this email that really stressed me out. Or, oh, I just had an argument with, and you're just like, oh, okay, interesting. What were you thinking before you were binging on that Ben and Jerry's? Oh, right. Okay. You'd had this all, just being not like open. It's not a judgment, but just being endlessly curious of what is the body trying to say? What is it asking for? And where can we meet those needs, and where do we just need to accept that maybe we can't meet those needs? It's a bit of a balance between the two.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, it's about bringing in this awareness of what was happening just before, what were your thought processes, how were you feeling? Because we go through life on such autopilot. And especially now when there's so much going on, like your brain just cannot compute, and you're just grabbing whatever to eat quickly, or you're eating on the run, or doing whatever the habits are. But it's when you're able to take that wee step back and start being aware, because that's where I always start with my clients. So, like, you need to be aware of what it is you're actually doing. So what are you eating from morning to night? What times are you eating? What mood are you in while you're doing that? What are you drinking? Why are you drinking it? What are all these wee things? And once you've started to build a picture of what the actual daily routine and daily habits are, then we can start to, you get to know and you go, oh, I've just realised every time I meet up with this person, I do this behaviour because I've slipped into an older version of myself, or I'm not really that comfortable being around those people, so I drink to make myself feel more comfortable, or whatever the habit is. Or we always, when we get together, we always celebrate, and how we celebrate is doing this, but actually it makes me feel worse the next day. So can we celebrate in a different way?
Yeah.
It doesn't leave you feeling depleted for the next day or the next week or
Yeah.
whatever. But without any self-awareness, you can't actually make any changes.
No, and I think it's really, I sometimes, and you might find this, we're working with people and they're not, they're not going to the toilet, they're going to the toilet for like 4 hours, 5 hours because they're busy working, or they just have no. And that's where these kind of more nervous system regulation, self-awareness, mindfulness tools are so key, actually, of just like, okay, can I be the like curious observer of my body today? What does my temperature feel like? What's my stomach like? What's my heart rate like? Can I just tune into like the body? Can I ground myself in that? I think that's a key part of work I do with all my clients. Most of them don't want to do it. They're just like, tell me what to eat. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. First, let's work on your sleep. And then we're going to work on your nervous system regulation. And then we're going to obviously look at food and what's going to serve you best and what's going to kind of help you to feel the way you want to feel. But it's really important that we can become aware of just how our body is and the state it's in, but also not too aware as well, because then you get the opposite end of it where there's a lot of anxiety of like, I felt this twinge and I think that must mean I have like, you know, cancer, brain cancer. And I went onto ChatGPT and you're like, whoa, okay, you might have just had a bit of trapped wind. Like, yes, if you need to go to the doctor, like let's got red flags, let's go and get them checked out, but also enjoy the sunshine and the trees and go look at a loch and like pet a cute dog or cat. It's they can, depending on someone's brain, they can. I get a lot of the people who work with me, it's probably because I'm very similar. I get a lot of very analytical, overthinking, just like their brain is like going at a bajillion miles an hour. So it's like, and then I did that, and then I did that, and then I'm like, whoa, let's do some like practice meditation, even if it's like for 3 minutes, where you're just being present and breathing and like, pausing the monkey mind, which sounds really easy and often isn't easy when you're in that state, but that's why it's a practice.
Yeah. Yeah, and then if you if you're like me, you practice it and then you start to feel better and then you stop practicing it because you feel better now. And then you realise you've slipped back down, you're like, oh shit, I need to bring that back in.
Yeah, it's true. I've changed how I frame that to help me, because I'm a like when you think about what motivates you for creating change, I'm partly if I understand something, I'll create change. So that's where the kind of geeky sciencey part comes from. Like if I read something that I'm convinced with, then I'm like, cool. Like I went gluten-free many, many years ago because I remember reading something about it and I was like, cool, cool, cool. Think this would, that's what created the change. And then obviously the fact that I felt better was what sustained it. But I'm also part rebel, so I really hate being told what to do. Like, so if you were like to me, Jen, right, Kezia, I'd really would love you to meditate every day for about 10 minutes, ideally in the morning. There's a part of me would be like, yes, yes, that makes sense. And then a part of me would be like, F you, I'm gonna do whatever that chuff I want. So I've had to learn with nervous system regulation and these self-awareness practices to make them just like regular is how I talk about it. I'm like, I might do it every day, I might not. It might change. Some days it might be somatic movement, some days it might be yoga, might be meditation, like, but the goal is just to regularly nourish that sort of part and create that awareness, that sort of that witnessing the self in a loving and compassionate way is sounds really, I don't know. I think sometimes when you're struggling or in chronic pain or chronic symptoms, you can be a bit like, oh, for goodness sake, I just want to feel less crap. But it's a really important part of it if you, especially in that sort of holistic approach. And I think some of it's my brain. I'm a Capricorn sun, so my natural inclination is quite grounded, practical, like I listen sometimes to these podcasts or healing stuff and I'm like, that's all well and good, but what does that mean on Tuesday? Like on a Tuesday, what does that mean? Like this is I don't even disagree with what you're saying, but you know that always I always have to. So I think whenever I'm doing content or my podcast or something, I'm always like, this is what it might actually look like, and that can be my own resistance to, or has been in the past, this kind of cultivating this self-awareness. But I have found the more that I have created that, supported my nervous system, done somatic work, therapies, body work, huge component, I think, to just feeling as best as you can uniquely feel, essentially.
Yeah. And sometimes it can I sometimes think, oh, this feels like a full-time job. And I'm doing my supplement regime and then doing my practices and then this and then that. And I'm like, I don't understand how people like with kids, like you've got kids, I don't have kids. I'm only looking after myself.
Yeah.
How people with families fit in looking after themselves. And then other days, it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like all the right steps.
Mm.
Like, this is what I do to look after myself. This is what I do to nourish myself. Why would I do it any other way? Why do I think that it's difficult? But what I've started to notice is those thought processes come in within my cycle,
Yes, that
and
makes
it's
sense.
because I'm 47, so nearly, so I'm like definitely most likely a perimenopausal. Things are changing, things are
Yeah, yeah.
fluctuating, and that motivation definitely you notice the fluctuations, and then it's like, right, how can I stabilize that? Because it's something that I'm noticing. I'm like, oh, dreams are a wee bit mental, or I'm very hot in these nights. So can I keep track of that so that I can start to tweak things for myself to help keep nourishing my body so that I'm responding with the changes that my body's naturally going through.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and that's a really good point actually as well that you mentioned of like it can feel like a lot if you followed all the advice on the internet or that you might get thrown at, spit out at you from ChatGPT. And I think that is the downside of the kind of information-rich age that we live in, where data research is at our fingertips, ready, available. You can consume as much as you want of it. So I think what the real important thing, the real thing I think to take hold of is if you are wanting to create more freedom, change, healing, whatever you want to call it in your body, is to make sure you have that you're not just gathering data, you're not just almost numbing out in research and analytical thinking or gathering potential things, because you can end up with this checklist of 25 things to do every day, which for most people isn't realistic. And that comes from not actually knowing and understanding or listening to your body. And part of what I think is going to be even more important in the decades to come is that we don't just gather information, we also gather information uniquely about your body. So I do a lot of lab testing or gather the labs that people already have with their existing kind of consultants or GPs, and often run functional additional ones, so that someone's really clear on if everything in their life goes to pot, which is guaranteed to happen at some point, these are the 3 or 2 things you prioritize, because based on your health, your lab data, your soul, your health history, you're really clear on that. And that's helped me so much. I had 3 kids in 2 years, and I had awful pregnancies with hyperemesis because I had twins. My second set was twins. And I was wanting to return back to it with my business as well. And there was just a lot of stuff kicking off with trauma and about other stuff in the past. And actually, it was so empowering to know, because by that point, I'd already done a lot of this work. So I was like, I actually know right now, I'm not focusing on these 5, I'm not fanning around with these 6 things that are maybe good for me to do. I am laser focused on this and this. I'm laser focused on replenishing, nervous system regulation, and I'm laser focused, especially kind of postpartum, on nutrient repletion and the foods that I'm eating. So if someone wants to help me, like it, I wasn't trying to do cold water therapy and meditation and this and this and this and this and this. Or even this year's my hormones, I've just had some hormone results at lab test backs. My hormones suddenly been boring for years, suddenly go mental. And it runs in my family history. All the women in my family at this age, everything goes to pot. Anyway, it's just actually knowing, okay, now I have this data. I'm like, oh, so interesting. I know I need to support this estrogen pathway. And I would never just assume that, if that makes sense. I would have no idea. But now I know, okay, I can do these 2 things with rosemary and broccoli sprouts each day. That's specifically going to help that. I don't need to stress about doing all the perimenopausal things, because I'm not gonna when am I gonna do them? Or I'm just gonna get stressed about doing them. I know what my body is communicating, what it is saying right now is this and this. Cool. What's the laziest amount of action I can take that actually is gonna make a difference to how I feel, rather than feeling the pressure of having to do so many things. But while that's really well intentioned, comes from a really solid intention for a lot of people that I see, It's actually comes from not thoroughly understanding their and I think that, and you probably see that all the time, it's like not understanding actually this is my Achilles heel, like I know this is and I know this is like, and so that can be, and that's it's annoying in that it would be different from maybe your friend, your pal, your sister, and it only comes from that kind of self-inquiry really of just like, hey body, what are you saying, what can I give you? And that kind of can help. I mean, we do need lifestyle change, like that is an inevitable part of it. But I also meet a lot of people, as you probably do, that are just like, oh my goodness, how do I do cold water, eat protein, take my things, have my fiber supplements, do my meditation, get some yoga in, do some sprint training, but not too much sprint training, do some recovery work, sleep for at least 8 hours a day, make sure my deep and REM sleep are all really good, make sure I get rid of endocrine disrupting chemicals, check for mold in my house, remove heavy metals, do gentle detoxing, grow my own vegetables, pet a dog. Like, you just still like, even saying all that out loud, our nervous systems are like freaking out. And I think that's when it can be, the information can be beautiful and it can be so cool to research, but ultimately it comes back to let's listen to my body. What's it saying? What does it need? And move from that place is, I think, so powerful. And probably what you do in your life and in your work brilliantly.
A question that crossed my mind when you were talking there, when you were saying about like the functional medicine tests, for people that don't know, what is the difference between going to the GP medicine and functional medicine?
Yeah, great question. So I describe it really simply as a lot of the, not all, but a lot of the tests you might get done with your GP, like I had some blood work done recently, is they're looking for markers that may indicate disease, if we just put it very, very simply. So what's my TSH, a thyroid marker? If that's out of the reference range, then they'll put me on thyroxine or the carboxymol one, the one for hypothyroidism. You know, it's looking for very distinct, precise bits of information. So with a functional test, and that's not bad, just to be clear, that can be really useful to know, really helpful to get bloods done or other works, whether it's a stool test through your GP or going and see your consultant to get, you know, the scans, or, you know, I've had MRIs done, I've had sigmoidoscopies done, I've had, you know, all the things done, can be really useful to do. But what a functional test would do is, and it's never looking for disease, because that's not, it's looking for function. How is the system working? And it's just basically like it's like you taking a photo of a specific area and just looking what's going on there, essentially. So if we're thinking about hormones, you might be thinking, oh gosh, I'm definitely in perimenopause, or I'm all over the place. You might get bloods done at the doctor. Great. It's really helpful to know your serum hormone levels, very useful. But if you can do a functional test, you might then look at, okay, and which is what I did recently. It's like, oh, okay, well, all my hormone production is all air quotes healthy. So yay, good. But this functional test is telling me how I metabolize or process my hormones. So I'm not getting a diagnosis. It's not telling me I have endometriosis or anything like that, but it's showing me some of the pathways of my body, of what do I do when I make estrogen, how do I turn it off and get rid of it, what pathway is that going down? Or say with a gut test, where you're taking a lovely scoop of your own poo, you're putting it in the post to a certified, you know, really good quality lab that the NHS uses as well. And you are getting that tested, not to diagnose. So, you know, like an irritable bowel disease, that would always be something, as you know, you do from your doctor based on different specific inflammatory markers and the levels they are, and biopsies and a whole other range of diagnostic criteria. With the stool test I would run, you're just basically looking at what's the good bacteria that you have. Is there any pathogenic bacteria that we know from research should not be in a gut microbiome? Is there any imbalanced bacteria that we're not quite clear in the research if it should be there, but we kind of know it's not meant to be there, so we're a bit confused? Is there yeast there? Is there parasites there? How is the chemistries working? So it's not providing you with I have X. It's providing you with, okay, like, there's actually quite a lot of inflammation in my gut. My inflammatory markers aren't elevated, so I'm not going down an IBD path. which is really useful to know. But I do have loads of yeast growing overboard, like in a ridiculous amount. Or I do have loads of Klebsiella or Citrobacter or these other known pathogenic diseases, bacterias that don't equate to a diagnosis. So there's no thing on the algorithm in your GP's box of, oh, I have Citrobacter overgrowth. That doesn't exist. But it does, we do know from research that they create inflammation, and we know the consequence of having the presence of these bacteria can have in the body. And there's lots of, so you can get hormone tests, you can get stool tests. I'll often do extra bloods with people as well, because sometimes they don't have a full set with their GP, or their GP is not willing to do that. But there's lots of other ones that you can get done. Some of them aren't necessary. I think some people do go a little bit overboard with lab data. And I think it's always really important to do it strategically, because they're private and they cost money. So you really want to gather all the data. Well, this is my opinion. You want to gather all the data that you can, organize it, categorize it, and then look, do we have any large data gaps? And does that make sense for a test to fill that data gap? And if so, most of the time with the clients I work with, there's large data gaps, and it's helpful to have that functional lens as well as a diagnostic lens. It's not an either or. It's just really more about broadening the data set that you have, so you can make more prioritized and strategic decisions, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Super interesting. Like,
so interesting, Jen. I love it.
I wish I had lots of disposable income, but then I would be the person that would be getting tested every month or every other week, because I'd need to know, because I want to know where I am at this point and this point and this point and this point, and then just overwhelm myself with far too much information and not trust listening to my body and going, right, actually, I'm not pooing until 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so that's maybe an indication that my liver's a wee bit sluggish. What have I been eating the few days before? What can I tweak? What can I do to support liver function? Can I do this? Oh, I've been waking up at this time of night. And I like to use the Chinese medicine organ clock, especially if somebody's been waking up at the same time each time. And I'm like, okay, well, if it's always this time, what's going on? Like, how has your digestion been? Or how has this been? Or how has that been?
Yeah.
And seeing how that fits. And that can be really useful and interesting for people to just start exploring, to learn to listen to their own bodies. Because, like, I know that I've got inflammatory bowel disease, and I know that a lot of the private lab tests don't want to analyse a IBD stool because it's not the same. There are so many other factors.
Yeah.
I was listening to the Gutsy podcast recently, and they had a dietitian who is a researcher at Glasgow University, and he was talking about inflammatory bowel disease and how actually when it comes to diet and fibre, less fibre for people with IBD is better, because the less diversity of the gut microbiome helps prevent, and they're trying to find out which microbes that they're reducing are the ones that are potentially triggering that inflammation, because in a healthy bowel, that bacteria might be absolutely fine in there, but in somebody who's got inflammatory bowel disease, a particular microbe might be the one that kicks off the inflammation, because the ecosystem, all those bacteria have a reason to be there. Like your E. coli and your helicobacters might be classed as bad bacteria, but actually they stop worse bacteria from taking over. So you don't want to completely annihilate all of them.
No,
and it's so complicated.
It's making sure you do look at the whole terrain of a person, rather than being like, and I've run stool tests with people with IBDs, and so I think they can have a role and a place. You've just got to make sure you look at them through the right kind of lens in terms of the wider functioning of the body. But it's one of those things, I think, with stool testing or with any testing, it's making sure you always match the data that you get with the person. If that makes sense, you don't just go, well, Jen's data says this, so now we're going to put her on oregano oil, because that, you'd be like, No, that's a terrible idea because we also know these other data points about Jen and have these and we know her immune system functions like this and this sets her off. And so it's really making sure, and that's the problem I think people can get into is they like, because a lot of tests you can do on your own, whether it's blood work, and they just assume, oh, I obviously just need loads more B12 or I need loads more iron. And you're like, oh, these tests are really useful when you slot them into the jigsaw of that wider approach and what you already know. And also, it's you don't need to do, a million at once. You actually just need to do the things that are most strategic to whatever your kind of intention or goals are. Sometimes I do get clients that are like, I want to do everything. And I'm like, no, we're going to do one at a time and then take action on it, listen to them. And if we don't make progress, we will look at what data gaps we have and fill them appropriately.
Yeah.
Let's just go slow the pace down. And I'm although saying that, I've been doing this for over 10 years. And so I have now done a lot of tests on myself over the 10 years. And it is endlessly fascinating, I have to say. I'm just like, I did training this year on genetics and so on nutrigenomics. So the genes that we know we affect through lifestyle, nutrition, and these kinds of things. So it was a practitioner training course. Anyway, wanting to do it for years, but I was too busy having babies. And you do test results and you are on yourself or on a client. But obviously I chose myself. So I was like, this is so fascinating. I now know like so much about my genetics, which being in the place I'm in, I don't find that overwhelming. Like I wouldn't recommend this for somebody I work with, but just being able to like, oh, this is why I felt so crap for so many, not the only reason why, because it's not all about genetics, but it is. I think especially if I've spent many years feeling really like I was hypochondriac, that I just needed to toughen up, or people just wouldn't listen to me. They would just patronize me, ignore what I said, fob me off. And I was like, I'm in my early 20s, I'm in chronic pain, I'm constantly fatigued, I'm shitting myself on a daily basis, my hormones are all over the place. There, I am not fine, yet you constantly tell me I'm fine. Like, and I was just like so sick of that. So now to suddenly the other end of the scale, to just be able to really understand, oh, this is how my gut, okay, this is my genes. And it's not that this is the answer to everything. Everyone needs their genetic test done. You really don't, actually. It can be helpful sometimes. But for me and the way my brain works, it really helps me to lend so much compassion to myself because I'm like, oh, you're not crazy, Kezia. This has been really hard. And often
Yeah.
when we're going through test results with clients, they do often cry, sometimes just from a sense of relief, not because they're getting a diagnosis, they're not, but I'm just saying sometimes oh, it makes so much sense for why you feel awful. Like a
Mm.
client recently has been through the absolute ringer with her health, fobbed off and just so many ways that actually make me quite mad. And she's now like in her early 40s. She came to work with me and is still, working with her doctors and because they think there's endometriosis going on as well, but it's primarily gut issues. And there was a huge overlap there. Anyway, and we were just going through getting her gut results back. And when I just looked at them, I was like, geez, no wonder she feels awful. And she was the classic case of no inflammatory markers. So there was no irritable bowel disease going on. And that had come up with the stool test the doctors had done. But the chaos in her gut microbiome was so clear and so pervasive. I was like, no wonder you feel like crap. But she'd had about 15 to 20 years of people being like, it's because you're a new mom, it's because you're stressed out, it's because you're perimenopausal, it's because you're stressed, it's because you used to smoke, it's because. And she was just like, oh my goodness, so you're telling me I'm not a complete crazy person? I'm like, well, it's not really my job to tell you that, but what what I can tell is that yeah, it's just your gut is really the garden of your gut is like a bit of it's the one filled with trolleys and dog crap and crisp packets and just like, weeds that have taken over. And no wonder you're struggling to like grow any flowers, shall we say,
Yeah.
metaphorically. because there's not there's stuff to work with and it can change. But I think it is it's a big I find that very helpful for myself. But again, it's like a bit of everything, a bit of balance. If you go too into it, you could get lost for hours. And it's not always the best use of money either, strategically, like budget
Mhm.
wise. It's not always the most important thing. So yeah.
Yeah. It's so the body is so fascinating.
It is.
So fascinating. And
Yeah.
I think getting some data points are definitely useful because I was on the borderline of being anemic. So they wanted to give me an iron infusion, and I was like, no, I don't really want that. So I'm going to try and do it through diet. So increased iron supplements, made sure I was doing the vitamin C, not having teas, any tannins around when I was taking my iron. Went back, got more blood, my iron done again, and it had dropped. And it was lower. And I was like, right, so I'm taking more iron, but I'm not absorbing it. So that's a metabolic issue. There's a problem. My body's not absorbing it. I need to look at my copper levels. I need to look at other things. And you know that way, there's just a glaze of I don't know what you're talking about. And you're like, just leave
Yeah.
it with me. I'll work this out. So then I went away and I did more work on my liver, doing massage on it, tapping on it, vibration before I was eating to make sure I was stimulating that properly, getting the digestive enzymes going. And then my iron started going up. And I'd actually taken the iron supplements out.
Mhm. I love that.
And I was just like, told you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great example of just that sort of like, oh, well, this is low, just take this. I have to, thinking of a lady I worked with, she came to me, low iron, what she was offered, she nearly got a transfusion, but she was like 1 point above what she was allowed to do. So she had just been chronically low. I think it was maybe like 15 or something, and the cutoff was maybe 14 of her, I think it was her ferritin. Anyway, and so she just tried it. She'd done what they said. She tried all the other things. She tried, but then when we started, I was like, they'd only ever checked her ferritin, they'd not looked at all the other kind of iron components to it, or a B12, or all the other things that interplay. And it wasn't just like, oh, you just need to take an iron supplement and then everything will be fine. It was looking at the whole environment, the whole terrain
Mm.
of absorption, intake, getting it into the bloodstream, all of those things. And I think it's that's just that it's not how conventional medicine works. It works really well for so many things, but for some things, it's just not got the right kind of tools for. And when you really support the body often quite likes it, and it like wakes up, just like your example is. It's like, oh, okay, oh, let's absorb some iron then, sure.
Let's see what I need to do.
Yeah, yeah. Because it's just had a little bit of like witnessing and listening and love and, somebody, whatever, giving it what it needs. And then it kind of, I mean, it's maybe a bit too simplistic. It's not always how it works, but I think we could lean into that more for sure.
In my mind, I have this vision of some of the cells in my body sitting back on a sun lounger smoking a fag. Like I'm on my tea break. I'm not needed right now. And it's when you start waking them up and you go like, I need you, that then they kick in. It's just like, I don't know why I have this little mental image inside my body. I'm like, smoking a fag, I'm not doing any work. And I'm like, no, I need you to, come on, come on.
Yeah, yeah. And then you probably have other cells in the body that are like a toddler trying to help you. Let me help. Let me help. And you're like, no, 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 no. This is the most unhelpful thing you could do right now is to try and help me. Please don't help. Please. No, 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 no. I'm gonna help. Look, I'm gonna make loads of antibodies. Woo. And you're like, no. I just yeah, you need to go on this. We need to switch roles. You need to go on the sun lounger. This one, like, it's so the body is just endlessly fascinating. I'm often the same. I often think about like the give lift different bits of personalities to different parts of my bodies or different cells, because I know that like areas of sluggishness where they're on their sun lounger, and I'm like, come on. And then I have other parts like my like adrenaline production. Oh, honestly, it's just like the toddler that just some of it's genetic, some of it's history, some of it's trauma based, where you're just like, no, 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 we're actually cool. Like, yay, like
Just
yeah, don't need your help right now. No, there's no bears.
Just a postman at the door. You do not need to be on high alert to answer the door to the postman. He's not, he's a nice man.
Yeah, you've known him for about 7 years, or like, I hate my phone ringing. I never answer my phone because and I've just accepted that. Like, it's not something I can be bothered to work on. Do you know what I mean? Where I'm just like, oh, how dare someone phone me? It's like my little brain is like, just kicks off, and you're like, take a breath. It's fine, you know,
Yeah.
it's fine. And yeah, it's funny. The body is amazing. And the more you learn about it, the more you just realize you don't know, and the more you keep learning. And I think that's why there's so much power in understanding your body. Like, I think it's one of the greatest gifts you can give to yourself, or I would say. And even investments, I've invested a lot of money in, whether it's my, not even just my training, but actually, my own health and well-being. And there's lots of questions around that, around access and privilege and economic things for sure. But actually, it is one of the best investments I've ever made and continue to make, because I now, it's like facilitated, and everybody's journey is different, but it's facilitated me understanding my body, having compassion on it, listening, accepting, and also just knowing what is the environment I personally need to thrive. What is that? And that looks different for you. It looks different for, what is this? What do I need? If we're thinking about it like a plant, how much sun, how much rain, how much soil, how much like flower friends, all the environmental, like, what do I need to really thrive? Not generically, not based on what Instagram says or what Pinterest says, based on me. And that is such a gift. I think that I've been able to give to myself and others, that you can give to yourself of, okay, what is the environment set up that I need internally, externally? What is going to help me? Where can I just ignore stuff because I know it's not for me, it's not what I need? Where, all of these kinds of things. It's because I think, and it's also, I do think it's a little bit of a reclamation and quite a radical act as well, of women coming home to their bodies, understanding them, witnessing them, becoming aware of them, is a radical thing that even my grandma and my great grandma haven't have been able to have that level of, based on the societal and oppressive systems that we've been a part of. So it makes sense that we have no idea what our bodies need, but a way, I think, to really shift things for future generations, and to really kind of give it like the two fingers up to some of the more oppressive systems we've been under, is to actually do the radical act of like being really good friends with your body and being a really good listener and a really good carer of it. Because historically, women's bodies were never ours. They were for other people, other people's users. We had never had that sovereignty over them. And that's not the case now. We now can be autonomous and sovereign in our bodies. And that makes me very happy to be alive now, and not however many years ago.
Yes. Yes. I've absolutely loved this conversation, and I think we could probably go on for the
We
rest of the
could, we could, but we shouldn't, because our blood sugars will drop too much.
and we also have other things that we need to get done. Not just put the world to rights.
True.
So anybody who's listened to this, where are the best places for them to find you, to follow your work, to get in touch if they are interested in working with you?
You can find most things at keziahall.com, which would be my website. I have a podcast as well called Cacao with Kezia. So there's like over 300 episodes there. If you want to hear my voice more, you can go and have a listen there. And I'm also on YouTube at Kezia Hall. So if you're thinking of working with me, best head to the website and you can book in a free call and we can chat more about it. And I'm very chilled about these kinds of things. And if you just want to hear more about my approach, the way that I do things, podcast or YouTube, depending on the podcast is a bit more geeky. I look a lot more and kind of do my version and review of scientific papers sometimes and interesting stuff that's come through. And YouTube is a bit less geeky and more a bit like this is how I do things. So you can kind of pick which vibe you want. But yeah, those would be the best places.
So I'd highly recommend checking them out. I will put that information into the show notes so anybody listening can just click straight to there. So I just want to thank you so much for this great conversation. I've absolutely loved it. Lisa was right.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Lisa. So thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you so much, Jen. I've loved it.